Time again for Doc Jacques, your Addiction Lifeguard podcast. I am Dr. Jacques de Bruckert, a psychologist, licensed professional counselor, and addiction specialist. If you are suffering from addiction, misery, trauma, whatever it is, I'm here to help. If you're in search of help to try to get your life back together, join me here at Doc Jacques, your Addiction Lifeguard, the Addiction Recovery Podcast. I wanted to be real clear about what this podcast is intended for. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes, but not considered help. If you actually need real help and you're in need of help, please seek that out. If you're in dire need of help, you can go to your nearest emergency room, or you can check into a rehab center or call a counselor like me and talk about your problems and work through them. But don't rely on a podcast to be that form of help. It's not. It's just a podcast. It's for entertainment and information only. So let's keep it in that light, all right? Have a good time, learn something, and then get the real help that you need from a professional. Well, it's been just about a little over a month since my last podcast, and the reason for that is I've been super busy writing a book, and I'm trying to get it done. So I apologize for my listeners who have not heard me for a month. And if you have ever tried to write something of any size, it seems like, if you have an interest in it in an area, or you have some expertise or something, you talk about it like I do all the time, all day long, and on podcasts and whatever, that it would be easy to put it down on paper. But in fact, I have discovered it is quite complicated, much more complicated than perhaps I had anticipated. So hopefully I'll be getting that done soon. So again, I apologize for not doing my podcasts. So let's get into a topic. And the one that I wanted to talk about was something that I've run into a couple of times in the last month. Well, more than a couple of times, actually. Been every week, multiple times a week over the last month. And that is what happens when somebody is falling into their addiction. So as I've used these terms before, the civilians, right? The non-addicts out there, the civilians, as opposed to us professionals. So the civilians out there don't really understand the whole the concept of isolation. And as I have said over and over again in these podcasts, isolation is addiction's best friend. You see, when normal people, civilians, drink, or let's just stick with drinking. If they drink, they have a drink and they put it down. And they're usually doing it around other people. Maybe they might have, a cocktail of something when they're watching a television show or something on their own. But for the most part, people who are civilians, they're going to drink probably with other people. And we certainly see that in advertising, right? You get together with your friends, you have a drink, and everything's great. But see, that's not how professionals do it. They might have a chemical of choice with other people, but they're going to keep it in moderation for the most part. Contrary to what you see on YouTube videos and TikTok videos and Instagram stuff, the person's falling down drunk and, ha ha ha. But, the thing I notice about the people that are doing that, they seem to be pretty well put together. I was just watching a video on, I think it was on YouTube. It was little shorts of like people who were falling down because they were drunk, doing stupid things because they were drunk. I could tell when I looked at that of the, let's say 12 little short 10-second clips of people falling down or whatever. I could tell by looking at them, there wasn't a single one of them that was an alcoholic. They were put together. They were walking around with other people. And they were conducting themselves just the way they moved. You couldn't hear what they were saying as they were doing whatever they're doing, falling in a bush or whatever. But these are people they're civilians. They are not professionals. They are with alcohol. They were drunk and they were doing something stupid, but you could tell they're not alcoholics. They're normal people who just drank too much and they can't handle it. So what do we do? What do professionals do when they're using? They use privately. They do it in private. They do it solo. The best drinking, the best use of weed, the best heroin, cocaine, whatever, they're going to do it in isolation. But why? And that's what came up with these conversations I've had with people who are, most of them were reaching out to me, seeking help for other people. Talked to a gentleman on the phone for about 20 minutes, and he could not get his arms around the idea that his loved one was doing something and he wasn't sure that it had gotten to an extreme. However, he described all these things around the behaviors that are indicative of somebody who is an alcoholic. And that is, performance at work, the relationship issues falling apart, the absence at family functions. And I asked him, so in this conversation when he's looking for help, I said, well, okay, so you're telling me all these things that are just typical for somebody who has an addiction problem. How often do you see this loved one? And he said, oh, I see him maybe 4 times a year. I'm like, oh, okay, so you don't have eyes on him. How many? 5 years ago, how often did you see him? Oh, I'd see him, I don't know, every month. Okay, well, why don't you see him with the same frequency? And he said, oh, he's busy. And I was like, yeah, he's busy drinking, and he doesn't want you to see it. And he's putting up all this smoke and mirrors to confuse you. So he's isolating. And it took me a while of explaining it for him to realize that perhaps he was isolating. But even then, he didn't fully buy into it. He just kept with the story of he's busy. He just got divorced. He's having problems at work. He's not talking to relatives. He's been oppositional about any hinting of the fact that there's a problem with drinking. He's very oppositional about that verbally. And you don't think he has a drinking problem. And it's like the isolation is the biggest clue there. People who are slipping further into their addiction, they don't want to hear the noise coming out of your mouth when you're complaining about what's happening. And I'm telling you, from 20 plus years of experience in working with addicts, isolation is exactly what they do when they're escalating, 100% of the time. Back in the 70s, there was this movie. It was called Arthur. And in it, the actor, Dudley Moore, played a gentleman who was super wealthy. He was a trust fund baby, and he had become an adult, and he was in his, he looked like he was probably in his 40s, early 40s, I'd say. And he was this kind of very affable, friendly, very charismatic, harmless, because he was always having a good time. He was laughing, and it was funny. But he was fall down drunk every day. And he meets this woman, Liza Minnelli, and I can't remember his name was Arthur in the movie. I can't remember what her name was, but it was the actress, Liza Minnelli. And she falls in love with Arthur. And every day he gets up, he has nothing to do except be in this big giant mansion house with a manservant and a driver. And he has nothing to do all day except drink. So that's what he does. And he does it very publicly, which I thought was kind of interesting because, in the 70s, perhaps they thought that, and it was, well, first of all, it was a movie that was supposed to be humorous, right? So it's really funny watching Arthur laughing and giggling all the time, drunk, stumbling around. At the time, I was a teenager, late teenager when it came out. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of funny. However, I was growing up in a home full of 2 parents who were alcoholics. And for me, the alcoholism was a freaking nightmare. But I'm watching this movie and I thought, oh, this is kind of funny. And I thought it was funny at the time. But then again, now that I look back at it, it's like it wasn't funny. So you couldn't make that movie today. I don't think you really could. Because it's not funny. It's not okay to just be fall down drunk and make light of it all the time. That aside, so what was he not doing? He was being portrayed as not being isolated. He was not isolating. His major domo guy, who was his manservant, was always an older man, was always around, kind of watching over him, and but he didn't isolate. In reality, he isolates. Now, there's two things about isolation. One is it's self-imposed, and that's certainly part of it. But the other part of it is it's because people don't like being around somebody who's high or drunk all the time. And if you're listening to this and you're an addict, you may take offense to that. But you know what? Nobody wants to see you when you're that way. And that is a key part of this because, there's all kinds of jackassery going on, and nobody wants to see it. Nobody wants to be subjected to it. The crazy mood swings, in some cases, potentially violent behavior being directed at them by the addict who's high, the unreliability. It's a socially awkward thing to have somebody that's really high or drunk around you when you're not and you're in public. Nobody wants to be around that. So some of it is self-imposed isolation, but part of it is also kind of rejection of the person, which in the case with the man on the phone who's talking to me, the father of this gentleman, he didn't like the fact that this was going on. And I hear this with people all the time, especially parents who have, middle-aged children to up into their 50s, and the parents are wringing their hands about what to do. And they deny the isolation thing. They don't think it's an issue, but yet they've been experiencing it in an ever-increasing amount as that person slides further and further into addiction. So isolation is addiction's best friend, and it's where addiction starts to really kind of flourish. It grows in that isolation because there's nobody there to say, hey, man, this is not okay, or I don't like that, or I'm leaving because you are too drunk, or you're just passing out, or you're not showing up. It doesn't, there's nobody there to say, hey, that's not okay. And that's by design. That's on purpose. People do not want to hear that, so they will eliminate those who can give that voice to that objection to the addiction. And that's why isolation is addiction's best friend. And so when you're around somebody who has an addiction problem, you'll notice that they start slipping away from you. You're seeing them less and less and less. When you do see them, it's for shorter periods of time. There's lots of excuses for getting out because they want to leave and go use. And so they will make an appearance. You hear that a lot. Like, yeah, I made an appearance. Yeah, you showed up for like 20 minutes, but it was a dinner party and you didn't have dinner. Oh, well, I had other things to do. That's what you start hearing. Like there's always other things going on, but there is nothing else going on. It's just escape. And so the isolation, I'm leaving because, and sometimes what people will do is they will come up with these false reasons for leaving. These, I don't like what you're telling me. You're being mean to me. And it could be about anything, not about addiction, but about anything. And that's somehow they construct some kind of situation where they can make their exit so they can go get high or drunk. I've witnessed situations when my children were younger. I remember there was a situation where there was a woman whose husband, I noticed over the years, it was a baseball game and my kid played Little League for years. And I knew these people, and I saw this guy becoming more and more involved in alcohol until the point where there was the mom would show up with the 3 kids, one playing baseball, 2 others that were younger. And the younger kids were like 5 and 7 or something like that. And her older son was my son's age. And at the time, I think he was like 9 or 10. I could see that she would stiffen when he would show up at these baseball games during the evenings, during the week. And then on Saturdays, I noticed he never came at all. But during the weekday, like any normal father would do, he gets off work. He's a white-collar worker. He's got his suit and tie, so he's taking his jacket off. Maybe he's got his tie on. But she would stiffen when he would show up because it was so unpredictable in his behaviors. And I remember one particular day, it was a It was an after-work game, so it was probably either on a Tuesday or a Thursday, which is when most of the games were played that I attended that year. And I remember he showed up. He was late. He showed up, and it was the into the second inning of the game. And I could see that she was sitting on the bleachers, probably 10 feet from me. I could see her stiffen. She was stiffening as he was walking up. And he comes up, and he walks up, and he sits down. And he was clearly drunk, I could tell. Most people probably would not have noticed easily, but because of my profession, I could tell. And he sat down, and she said hello, and he said hello. And he didn't acknowledge his two children that were running around, as kids do when their siblings are playing a sport. They were kind of running around. He didn't acknowledge them. He sat down next to his wife. She could immediately tell he was drunk as he was walking up. She could also tell that his drinking had started. Now, what time of day was this? It was about 5:45, maybe. Yeah, like 5:45. The game started at 5:30, I believe. So about 15 minutes. And he asked her, he sat there, and then he asked her the question, did he hit in the first inning? Did our son, was he at bat? And she's all flustered. And she said, I'm not sure. And she could tell what he was doing was he was starting to immediately ramp up so that he could start a fight and then leave. And he got mad at her because she didn't know if her son had been at bat. And he asked her again, and she said, I don't know. And then he looks at the kid who's playing on batting, and it's for the other team. And so he's looking at the team. He doesn't even know. He can't even tell where his son is on the field. I remember he didn't know what position his son was playing. Couldn't identify him on the field. And then he starts getting mad at his wife because she doesn't know. And he starts kind of raising his voice. Then he stands up, towering over her, and says, I'm just going to leave if you're going to be like that. And I'm paying attention to this. And she is embarrassed beyond belief. Can't believe that he's doing that. Nobody's really paying much attention. He's slowly escalating. And she goes, no, that's not it. I'm sorry. I was watching the kids. I wasn't watching that closely. I'm sorry. Just sit down. And he won't sit down. And he goes, you know what? This is just typical of you. And then he storms off. And he left. Now, where is he going? Well, he's going home to drink. And he was drunk when he got there, which means he's either drinking in the car on the way there, or he stopped at the bar or something on the way there. So, knocked back a few cocktails and then showed up at his kid's game. And within 5 minutes, he's arguing. And I'm going to say it was like 8 minutes. In less than 10, he's gone. And I saw her physically relax when he left. Because she's like, okay, well, the storm has passed through here. And now he's going to go home, most likely. That would be my guess. To drink. Now, the problem is she knows that she's probably going to run into it when she gets home. Because she can take the kids out to eat dinner after the game, which I'm guessing she probably did. And she can delay the return home, hoping that he's drank himself into a stupor and now he's become harmless. That's isolation. And he used that excuse to isolate. He created conflict where there was none. He engaged in an argument where there was no argument that needed to exist because he wanted to leave to go drink. And that's exactly what he did. So isolation is addiction's best friend. And if you're not isolated in the moment, you're going to create situations where you can isolate. And that's what people who have addiction do. So they become unreliable, inconsistent, argumentative, belligerent, verbally assaulting people, sometimes physically assaulting them, but not in a public setting usually, because that can turn into a legal issue. So that's what he did. And that is a textbook example of exactly what happens when people want to engage in their addiction above all else, right? So I don't care that my son is playing baseball. the thing about that situation is I attended every single baseball game my son had, with almost without exception. There were a couple of times when I couldn't because of illness or something, but I was always there. So I saw this progress over the years, and this poor woman, hopefully that guy's gotten some help. It's been like probably 15 years since then. I don't know, but be that as it may, when isolation occurs, they'll take advantage of it. When it's not available to them, they will create a situation where they can isolate. So when you're dealing with somebody who has addiction and they are doing this, it's not because they have growing anxiety or they're all of a sudden became super busy. It's because they're engaging in their drug of choice and they need to do it in isolation at the levels that they're going to do it. So don't be mistaken into thinking that if you somehow say to them, hey, you should show up at these family events. People really notice when you're not there. Or, when you don't go to things, people, think they don't care. The person you're talking to, they don't care. They just want to get high or drunk. That's all they care about. So you're just talking. It's just wind to the person who's hearing it, the addict. So, but understand what you're seeing is one of the primary indicators of an escalation where something has happened and now usage has turned into abuse of that substance, whether it's addiction dependence or addiction abuse. But isolation has caused them to want to engage in it more. Now, I've been talking all this time as if I'm talking to loved ones. Let me just say briefly to people who have addiction, if you are isolating all the time, that is a problem. That your usage is escalating and becoming a serious problem because you are lying to the people that love you when they ask you or inquire about how much you're using, because you're hiding how much you're using. And you're doing that because you want to use more and more and more. So understand that when you're doing that, that's what's happening to you. What's the opposite of addiction? For me, it's peace. And it's hard to be peaceful when you have no people around. So we get sober and clean through connections, through relationships. And those relationships are the ones that can help us continue staying in that isolation. So when you're experiencing your addiction and you're isolating, you got to get connected to people because you've been pulling away from people, pushing people away and pulling away from people yourself. So what I want you to do is I want you to work on ending of that behavior. And that's why it's important to go to meetings. And as loved ones of addicts, it's important for you to go to meetings too, because you're going to start isolating too. The woman that I was referring to in the story I told you, she felt very isolated because she's embarrassed, ashamed, and she doesn't know what to say. She doesn't want her husband to be an alcoholic and be that abusive, crazy, drunken person, but she's not going to say that to anybody. So that's why it's important for people who are loved ones to start going to Al-Anon so you can start talking about those things with your peers, other people who get it because they're living the same life. It doesn't matter if it's drugs or alcohol. Al-Anon is for the loved ones of addicts, period. They don't have to be alcoholics, but they just addiction. So go to Al-Anon and do the thing that you're asking the other person to do, the addict, which is to go to meetings, 1. 2, start engaging in reality and life and engaging with other people and get connected. And 3, start moving towards recovery. So if you are a loved one of an addict, you have to recover from their addiction as much as they have to recover from their addiction. So what I want you to do is I want you to get into those groups. Stop isolating. What you're seeing in that other person that's the addict is the isolation. Well, you're doing it too, but you're doing it for a different reason. You're doing it because of addiction, but you're doing it because of shame and embarrassment about somebody else. The addict is isolating because they just want to get high, right? So it's just a survival thing for them, survival of their addiction. So don't let the enemy get a foothold in your life and then slowly blow it apart because you're engaging in the thing that is the destruction. And that's the old adage of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So if I can get you two to fight with each other about, family circumstances or events or things that you do, and I can get you to engage in that isolation as an addict, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. That's what addiction does. It like plants the seeds of doubt and destruction in your lives, and then just waters them and tends those fields so that those seeds grow into plants, which turn into massive amounts of destruction. So find ways to heal and recover and change the way that you're existing in your lives so you can become better people. Well, that's this edition of Doc Shock, Your Addiction Lifeguard. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. If you have, please subscribe and like, and you can comment as well. I do appreciate the comments that you post about my podcast. If you got any suggestions or questions, you can reach out to me through my website, wellspringmindbody.com. And if you need help, you can reach out to me. I'll give you some direction. I'll give you some guidance. And maybe I can even work with you. I don't know. But whatever it is, listen, it's not worth ending your life to save your addiction. So go out there and start getting sober and clean. Go to a rehab, go see a counselor, go to the rooms, get into AA, NA, any of the A's, but get the help. So until next time, this is Doc Shock saying, see ya.